One day, a long time ago, in a galaxy we live in, and on this very planet, I read about the concept of intersectionality as it applies to many things like racism. I believe it was around mid 2010s when that phrase became modern vernacular. And I remember thinking to myself, has humanity gotten smarter somehow and learned how to do systemic level reasoning? Sadly, no, not at all. Humanity is still largely illogical and weak in reasoning. And the person who coined it, though, and those who understand it, however, they're trending upwards in brain power. The problem with the phrase white privilege, with many of those who claim it doesn't exist, they have multiple issues in that. So one, these dissenters will usually not have a definition. So the next logical step in their mind for an average human being is to create one themselves and then define it in a way that lets them easily deny that it exists. And this behavior is widespread and it's default human nature. It's the brain trying to conserve energy. I shared the evolutionary psychology research in biology that strongly supports that conclusion. I'll also share it with the video description so you can read more about it. But they'll say to themselves, well, Obama became president, so white privilege doesn't exist. Or if an Asian American makes more money than me, white privilege doesn't exist. This human nature flaw is not limited to this topic whatsoever either. Do you see the issue yet? They didn't do any research. They don't understand systemic factors to anything or how to compare likewise in a system. So, like, for example, some white woman might have a bad date with a person of color and then go on TikTok and say, all people of this race are bad. I'll never date one again. Or someone experiences someone matching a stereotype and then we'll see everyone like that. And then always believe it generally applies to all of that race forever, with few exceptions, unless you're rich and famous. This is also shown in my biology research in predictive hierarchy and coding in the brain. It's also designed to conserve energy. You have to think about what was the environment that we evolved from. It was designed to save energy because you couldn't go to Walmart or McDonald's. You needed to save that energy, and then you also needed to, make decisions that, were more general right away, versus now we live in a more complex society where understanding these sort of systemic factors is actually important because we now do things at scale. We're not a tribe of 150 hunter-gatherers anymore. So the next issue is that human beings do not understand statistics or big numbers naturally. There's a very famous Nature magazine article from the 1800s on this. And Thinking Fast and Slow also covers that topic. So see how if they see like one bad example in their brain, it will convert into thinking, okay, well then all people in that race are exactly like that. That's extremely illogical, but it happens all the time. So here's an example from something I read on Reddit where some woman was saying, well, I've definitely rejected more white men than those of color, so they have better odds. But where in that woman's calculus did she account for the fact that the majority of men in America will be white? So that would change how your statistics work in your example. You need to understand that, which, she did not from, what I could tell. Yet people make these illogical arguments all the time. And they have major outcomes that impact everyone in America. So there's a scientific basis to racism existing, and it really comes down to just energy conservation and tribe-like thinking. That's an artifact of evolution psychology. So hopefully that enlightens some of you on, if you're sitting out there saying white privilege doesn't exist, if your comparison is as simple as apples versus oranges, then you're oversimplifying the topic. You can't just cancel out something like you can get all these benefits in like dating or, proven in court systemic racism, and then just say, well, because Obama became president, that means it doesn't exist anymore. ask yourself this, like, after slavery ended in the Civil War, did everyone just become, completely not racist anymore? No, they were like, okay, we're going to do Jim Crow and then civil rights. You see how there is this unconscious like force that does not want to just accept other people. Like, how can, that not be obvious? But again, there's, systemic reasoning is not a natural human trait. You have to sit down and you have to actually think about it. And you have to look up when people are saying, what is white privilege? You have to take time to understand, what does that mean? And then, actually look at the argument and then, be okay with not, being correct if, you think that it doesn't exist, because it has impacts on every other American citizen out there. And honestly, even beyond America by law, like the comparison might be versus like apples versus oranges. You might say, well, in a systemic comparison, it would be, okay, we can plant, X number of trees, so maybe up to like 100 or 100,000 trees. And some of those trees can be orange trees. Some of them can be apple trees. And we can, plant up to this maximum amount. And, we have information on consumer diet and, projected needs. And we also want to figure out, well, how many should we plant of each of those in the ratio of that, and how many total, so we don't, exceed like a certain amount where we're wasting apples or oranges at that point. That is like systemic reasoning. See how that is a lot more complicated? You have to juggle more variables in your head. Well, hopefully that helps enlighten you on why people think white privilege doesn't exist, and, hopefully can help you make better arguments to people when, they're denying it. Ask them, first of all, like, well, how are you defining white privilege? And, what level of, things can be advantageous before you would concede defeat that, yes, there is a privilege purely to skin color. So hopefully that helps enlighten some of you out there.